Good morning, Glenn. How's it going this morning?
Dude, it's going smoother than, I don't know what, the clouds in the sky.
Yeah, well, wasn't so clear the other night when it was storming. Did you get a bunch of the wind
Got a lot of wind. We didn't get any rain in the East Valley here.
We got a lot of rain up down in Central Phoenix. There was around the shop and even at my house we got some significant rain, which
Yeah,
was
they
good.
said they had 3.5 inches up in Cave Creek, which is in the far North Valley here, which is crazy, man.
Yeah.
Well, I think I got a few drops on my car, and that's about it.
Well, Glenn, today's podcast, it's what do you smell?
What do you smell, Dave?
Might be a stinky passenger.
Could
But we're
be.
actually talking about
Well,
cars.
that's
we're
inevitable.
we're
right?
actually
Especially if
talking
you got
about-
a baby and they dirty their diaper in the back of the vehicle, you know.
Or an adult.
Oh my goodness! Wow! Come on, Dave. Let's not make fun of my old age over here. I'm not in diapers yet.
So, all kidding aside, we're not really talking about humans. We're talking about your car smells.
Yeah.
So, Glenn, tell me what you think this is. A maple syrup smell. When,
Maple-
after the engine is warmed up and after the vehicle has been shut off, or after the vehicle's been shut off for a few minutes.
Well, it could be that your kids spilled their maple pancakes when they went to McDonald's drive-thru, but that's probably not what it is.
Probably not.
It's probably antifreeze, Dave, because antifreeze has a very distinctive smell.
It's kind of
when-
sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet, and when it leaks out, it usually hits something hot on the motor and actually produces a vapor that has a very maple syrup-like smell to it.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. That's definitely something to be aware of, because if you're smelling it, and sometimes even too, think about this, the heater core is in the dash. And what
Yes, it
happens when
is.
that heater core starts to leak, you start to get that smell in your vents.
Yeah, it starts blowing through and makes the whole car smell like maple syrup. Sometimes you'll just detect it because, the air that's moving from the engine compartment, if it's hitting something hot in there, you're going to smell it. But when it's in the heater core, you're right, it gets really bad. And when it leaks in there, you're probably going to find some wetness on the carpeting, particularly. Most of them are on the passenger side.
Yeah, absolutely. You're gonna, if you start to smell that, that's probably the first thing you should do is put your hand down there on the floorboard of the passenger side and just feel around, see if there's anything wet. And if it's wet, chances are that's probably what it is. It's a heater
Right.
core.
But, radiator leaks, they can cause that smell. And because the water that's in there, the antifreeze mixture of water and antifreeze, it's going to produce some steam. So that steam is going to make its way into the ventilation system, and you're going to smell that too. And typically there's going to be some evidence on the ground, whether it's your heater core or some part of your engine. It could be heater hoses, could be radiator hoses, could be the radiator soffit, it could be the water pump.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it definitely could be a number of different things. And once, like you said, once that antifreeze leaks out and gets onto something hot, or it leaks in your car and you turn on the vents, you're gonna definitely smell that.
Right, and so when you start losing antifreeze, then what happens to your motor?
Well, then you overheat, and then bad things can happen. If you're driving down the freeway, chances are you're not going to be able to pull over fast enough that car starts to overheat.
Yeah, and once it overheats, then what can happen?
Then you end up buying an engine or doing a head gasket.
Yeah, and
And
both
that-
of those
which-
are extremely expensive repairs.
Right, and what you're turning maybe a $500 repair into about a $5,000 repair, or even a $10,000 repair. It's
Yeah.
just it's definitely not worth messing around with it. So that's a tall tale sign. That's one of the tall tale signs that you really want to kind of smell. And if you are smelling that, make sure you get the car checked out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, heat is the biggest enemy that you can possibly throw at your engine, at your transmission, any of those components. And believe it or not, your transmission fluid is also cooled through the cooling system. There's a cooler radiator-like looking thing in the front of your grill.
or it does go through the radiator.
It's called the transmission cooler.
Right.
Or if you're depleted of your coolant, many of the manufacturers now have gotten rid of that thing, and they have an oil cooler and/or a transmission cooler that looks kind of like a coffee can type of thing,
Yeah.
and it's got coils that run through it. So if you're smelling something that doesn't smell right, you're even cheaper off towing your car in somewhere than trying to drive it to the nearest facility to get it, because if it overheats in the meantime, you're in for a big bill.
Well, you alluded to it earlier. The one thing you really want to check if you do smell that is just make sure you got coolant. Look in the overflow bottle, and
Yes.
if there's no coolant in there, then it's something you really probably don't want to drive, because you don't know how low the radiator is at that point, because
Right.
you're not going to be able to see down into the radiator.
Right, and a word of caution too: never ever, if the car is overheating, take the radiator cap loose, because that thing will blow like a geyser and it will coat you and burn you. You can get severe burns. That radiator coolant water temperature can be 230, 240, 250 degrees. When that hits your skin, you're going to lose
We've
it.
seen people, and you know, I know
Burn
you
your
have too.
eyes,
We've
whatever.
seen people that have been burned by that, and it's not good. So definitely, you're right. That's a good warning. Is whatever you do when that car's hot, do not try to take the radiator cap off, or or dismantle anything, because there's a lot of pressure behind that.
Or never attempt to add coolant or water to a running hot engine. That's another thing. It'll blow up like a geyser, and it can cause severe burns. So I know sometimes you're here in the desert and it's 110, 115 degrees, and you feel like you're stranded and you have to do something. So you go grab that milk jug full of water in your trunk or something, and you try to add it, and it ends up being a bigger disaster. And then adding cold water to a hot engine can also affect the metal. It suddenly gets this cold water put on a hot engine, and it can warp things and have other consequences besides burning you. So think about yourself before you think about the condition of your car. You got to protect yourself, because you get into a serious problem.
Right. Well, you're 1 for 1, Glenn. All right, I got another one to throw at you. Gym socks smell. We all love that smell, right?
Oh,
Yuck.
Yeah,
When it recently rained and you turn the air conditioning on.
and you smell this musty odor coming through into your vehicle. Now, when you smell that musty smell coming into your vehicle, you may have a plugged up cabin air filter.
Or a science project.
Or a science project. There you go. Science project gone wrong in the back seat with the kids.
Yeah, right. That science project, I mean,
Mommy, can I bring my science project home? No.
we've all pulled those cabin air filters out. What happens is obviously they get moisture in that cabin air filter, and then when moisture and the human
Dust and
temperatures-
dirt and cat hair and dog
yeah.
hair and human hair and everything else that gets sucked up into that filter. The purpose of the filter is to protect what they call either the heater core and or your air conditioning evaporator core, which is where either the hot water goes to that mini radiator in your dash, or the evaporator, which has coils in it where the cold freon gas goes through it and cools your car. So what happens is you have to have a blower that blows through those things, and that blower has a suction side of it, because it has to suck air to blow air, and it sucks it up from inside of your vehicle, goes through the filter, and when that filter gets overwhelmed, it gets plugged, and then you get less ventilation first.
Well, yeah, the volume drops.
The volume drops, and also you start to get these musty smells in there. And sometimes you pull them out, and what do we find in some of those filters, Dave?
Like I said, it was a science project. You pull it out of there, and it's gross. It's like you said. There's hair. There's dirt. There's debris, leaves, and when all that's mixed, it turns into a mess.
Yeah, and oftentimes we even find rodent droppings
Oh,
and
well,
stuff in those things. They get in the pleats, and they make their little nest in the filter, and they're defecating and urinating in your filter. And you talk about horrible smells coming from your car's vents, that will definitely do it. So when you have your car in for an oil change, they should be checking that filter. And if they say it needs servicing, get it serviced, because if not, it's going to block up everything. You're going to not allow your air conditioning system not only to flow the proper air ventilation to you, but also it affects the temperature inside of your vehicle.
Well, yeah, and the thing of it is, if you start to smell a little bit of that smell, you want to get it checked out right away, because it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better.
Right. And sometimes through that same ventilation system, you'll smell other odors coming from burning oils or fluids from your vehicle. So the problem may not be in the dash. It might just be allowing it to ventilate through there. when you're on the recirculation mode in your vehicle, that'll block out about 90% of that air coming from the engine compartment area because it's going to recirculate
Right.
the same
You're
air
just taking the air
inside.
and recirculating the air inside the vehicle. You're not taking in new outside air. So yeah, definitely it'll cut down on any of those smells in the car.
Right. We'll call them odoriferous emanations.
I'll look that up later. So
Can you spell that, Dave?
Here.
That's today's challenge for Dave. Can you spell odoriferous emanations?
No, I can't even say it. So I'm not even going to try. So hey, you're 2 for 2.
2 for 2.
So now
I gave you my twofer.
This is going to be a hard one.
Does it
You
involve
up for the
steel?
challenge?
Does
Are
it
you up for the
involve-
challenge?
I am up for any challenge you can throw at me, my friend.
So, gas station smell when the vehicle's parked, and especially inside a garage when the weather is really warm outside.
Alrighty. So what we might have here is called an evaporative leak. That evaporative leak can come from the fuel tank, a bad fuel cap. It can also come from the vehicle having a leak in part of the system. The evaporative system starts with the fuel tank. It starts where you put in the nozzle, the gas nozzle to fill up your tank. There's all kinds of valves that are on that thing. There's what they call a charcoal canister, and that also has solenoids and valves on it. And then it has pipes that go up to the engine and then back to it again. And those smells, it can be even a cracked fuel pump. All the vehicle fuel pumps nowadays are made out of plastic, and that plastic over a period of time, it swells and it contracts, and it swells and it contracts both with heat and with fuel running through it, and the fuel itself starts to debilitate the plastic and the nozzles that come off the pump that go up to the engine and return, and when that plastic actually cracks like that, you're looking at 50 to 60, sometimes 80 psi, pounds per square inch of fuel pressure that's coming out of that pump to supply your engine with its needed fuel. And so it can start to weep or spray gasoline. You smell it inside your car.
I think one of the things to be clear on this is that any fuel leak is going to probably give you that smell like you're at a gas station. And then when the warmer weather happens, because heat expands, cold contracts. So when it's hot outside, obviously it's expanding. So what's happened is it's pushing out those fumes that you were talking about, Glenn, is with the evap system, it pushes those fumes out, so it makes it more prevalent that you're going to smell it. And in a confined area like a garage, you're really going to notice it in there.
Right, and sometimes it can be the fuel tank itself. I have a perfect example of that. We have a large Chevy van in here right now. It has a 40-gallon gas tank in it. And so we do what we call a smoke test. We pressurize, we put smoke in the tank to see where the smoke is coming up, because if you can smell fuel, a lot of times it's not the fuel pump itself or the gasket that holds the fuel pump in its place. It's actually the tank is cracked. And we have replaced probably this year 40 or 50 fuel tanks because now they're all made out of plastic.
Yeah, everything's...
And very few of them are made in the United States of America. So the materials that are being used, they make them as thin as they can. And there's all kinds of valves that are on there. They got what they call rollover valves and other vent valves that come off of that tank. And these plastic things are actually splitting, and now people are smelling fuel, not even when they're just filling their tank up. They're smelling fuel when they're driving down the road or when the vehicle sits or it's sitting in their garage. And the problem isn't the fuel tank. It's not anything around the engine. It's actually the fuel tank itself is cracked. And so those tanks have to be replaced because all of the vent valves, the rollover valves and everything, the rollover valves for if you get in an accident and the vehicle rolls over, it won't allow the fuel to spill out of the gas tank and ignite. So these are things that, again, you need a professional to look at it. You can't just guess. You may replace a part on it thinking that's going to fix the problem, and it really won't. The fuel tank has to be lowered, pressurized with smoke, and then you can see where the actual problems exist.
And I guess one of the big cautions out there for the consumer is that if you are smelling that, it's gas fumes. And gas fumes, it's flammable. So the point is you want to make sure that if you've got a leak, a fuel leak, You know, you don't want somebody throw a cigarette down in your garage, and next thing you know, you got a fire now. So
And your house burns down with your car.
right. So you want to be really cautious of that. You want to make sure that if you are smelling that, don't mess around with it. Get it into a shop. Let them check it out. And make sure that they figure it out.
And if it's severe, have it towed. Don't even attempt to drive
Right.
it.
Right. Right. If it's really bad, oh yeah, you shouldn't even drive it because a catalytic converter can catch the car on fire. I mean,
Absolutely.
if gas drips down on that thing, and that converter's 200 degrees.
Up to 1,300 degrees.
Yeah, 1,300 degrees. Yeah, and it'll light it up on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is it cheaper to tow your car for $150, or is it cheaper to call your insurance company because your garage and your house burned down and your car burned in the midst of it and could have injured or killed somebody else in the process? So
Yeah.
think. It's always really important. No one wants to pay to have their car towed, but you don't want to pay to have your house or your car or someone's life replaced.
It's not worth
You
it.
can't
Don't take
do
the
it.
risk. Don't
Right.
take the risk, and make sure that you get it checked out because it
Hey,
definitely is a fire hazard.
how's my scorecard, Dave?
Well, you're doing good. You're 3 for 3 so far.
We only have 18 more on the list,
Yeah,
right?
18 more on the list. This one's always the fun one.
Oh, boy.
Rotten eggs. Anytime your engine is running.
Well, you just mentioned it a few minutes ago. When you smell rotten eggs, it's probably your catalytic converter. The catalytic converter does have a rotten egg smell to it. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily failing, but it tends to be more so that smell comes around when the catalytic converter is failing and it's no longer properly processing the gasoline combustion fumes that would normally go out the tailpipe and process them. It starts getting built up inside of there, and it creates this horrible rotten egg smell.
In a converter, there's all kinds of different metals, and and a lot of those metals were
Platinum, palladium.
iridium. They're just
yeah.
all kinds of things inside there, and then it's high dollar metals, and its job really is to be an incinerator.
We missed rhodium.
Rhodium.
Now I get an extra 5 points for that.
You get an extra 5 points. Yeah. Well, I'm not really keeping score, but if
I'm keeping score. You're challenging me, man. I need to keep score. Okay, go ahead.
whatever makes you feel good, Glenn, I'm good with it. But really, with all of the with all the metals in there, the converter's job really is to be an incinerator for the unburned gases that the engine doesn't burn. That catalytic converter burns the rest of those gases, so it comes out the tailpipe clean.
Right.
I remember when we first got here to Phoenix, went back in '69. I remember I was a little brown haze over the top of Phoenix because all the pollution and stuff like that.
Yep.
You don't see that hardly anymore because the cars, they've gotten them to where they really do burn a lot cleaner. The next one is smoke anytime.
On the water, a fire in the night. Oh, that's smoke on the water. That's a different thing. Okay. Smoke anywhere, anytime. Well, that would probably be oil leaks, fluid leaks that are hitting something hot on the engine or the transmission or the exhaust. They can drip down on there, and probably when they hit the exhaust, they're really going to smoke bad. So if you have valve covers, an intake manifold gasket, a rear main seal, front main seal, those will gravitate back to those hot parts of the vehicle and end up making smoke on the water. Did I blow that one, or did I score?
It really was a trick question.
He's giving me that look. Like
it was a trick question. And the thing of it is when a customer comes in and tells you that this car's smoking any time, you kind of have to think about it, because if the car is cold and it's been sitting for 24 hours, let's say, and it's still smoking, that's a problem. It's on fire.
It's on fire. Yeah. Well, yeah, there are certain things that if something jams up and stays hot, and the voltage doesn't shut off to it, it can create smoke there. And there's also, your car can smoke out of the exhaust pipe, and that means you're burning oil.
Well, absolutely. When
you're burning oil, you're depleting the amount of oil in your crankcase and in your engine. Eventually, it's going to lock up the motor, and then you're back to $10,000-$20,000 repair.
It's funny you brought that up, because we were just talking about catalytic converters, and a catalytic converter can cover up a lot of that for a long period of time. When oil's going into the converter, it'll burn it. It'll burn it, and it'll come out the tailpipe, and you won't see the smoke.
But there is evidence. The evidence is, and this is the simplest trick you can do, take a piece of Kleenex, put it on your index finger, Stick your finger in the tailpipe and just swipe. If you get chimney-looking, charcoal-looking stuff on your finger, you are burning oil, which means that you need to do some treatments, and we recommend certain oil treatments to be done before and after the oil change, which will reduce that. What's happening is most of your vehicles now are using what they call low-tension rings, those which are the piston rings. The pistons go up and down inside your motor. I'm not going to get too technical. But over a period of time, those low-tension rings lose their tension. They're not grasping the cylinder wall and creating the compression. So some of that oil that's sloshing down into the lower part of the crankcase gets by those rings, and it ends up getting burned out the exhaust. Creates all kinds of internal engine problems with the valves, with the pistons, and your exhaust system, which are all trying to dissipate that oil and the aftermath of it being burned.
Yeah. Well, speaking of burnt, I got another one for you.
Uh-oh.
Burning rubber when you're not accelerating like you're on the Fast and Furious.
Oh, man. You just ruined my day. I mean, burning rubber is like one of the funnest things you can do with the car, right? Mostly the things that'll cause that rubberish burning smell is going to be a belt that is burning out on the vehicle. That's
So you're
one
talking
thing.
about maybe like a pulley's locking up?
A pulley can be locking up, creating, it's usually going to make a bad squealing noise. Sometimes it doesn't because you got actual oil on the belt that's just slipping, and that can create another smelly smell, a smoky smell, an oily smell burning. And also, even brake pads sometimes, they have a little bit different of a smell to them, but if your brakes aren't operating properly and you got calipers sticking, the pads are sticking to the rotors because your calipers aren't releasing the pressure off of them, that can create another kind of a burning smell.
Yeah, but mainly the
Or
burning
you left your emergency brake on, you kept driving.
Well, yeah, but it's more of like I think it's more like a metallic smell. But you kind of nailed it. Really,
Are
a
you
belt.
a Metallica fan? Is that what you're
A
trying to say?
Metallica fan, yeah. Hey, I got one of my employees that likes listening. He likes listening to them. Anyway, but I think you're right. Main thing is a belt. Typically, when you got a burning rubber smell, it's typically a belt that is because it's really it's rubber and it's moving. The only other rubber things on your car are basically hoses and you don't normally get the smell. from
And most
hoses.
cars now have spring-loaded tensioners that have
That's a good call, yep.
actually tension the belt. Back in the day, all of the belts were tensioned by a bolt and a nut and a pivot point where you'd pull back on the implement to tighten the belt. Now they're using spring-loaded tensioners, and those tensioners have a very high failure rate after you get 50, 60, 100,000 miles on them. The spring load, and there's actually a coil spring inside that keeps the tension on the belt. When that thing gets fatigued because of heat and just moving back and forth repetitiously like it does over the course of time, it fatigues and it no longer tensions the belt properly, so the belt starts slipping, and you're going to get that smell.
Right, and the thing, and I guess the big takeaway from this is that if you start to smell that, you want to make sure you don't drive the car, because the thing of it is if that belt does break or come off,
Immediate overheating will occur.
well, yeah, because a lot of those serpentine belts that we replace today run the water pump, they run the AC,
The
they run the power
alternator.
steering, alternator. So there's so many different things, and your dash is probably going to light up like a Christmas tree if it breaks anyway.
Right,
But
so pull over, get it looked at, have it towed, because the consequences of driving it, even another 4 or 5 miles, could cost you thousands and thousands of dollars in repairs.
Yes, exactly. And then you're stranded too on the side of the road, and sometimes you won't be able to get off the road, and it'd suck for you.
So are we out of smells now, Dave?
I think so, unless you got another smell. I was just going to ask you.
I was going to ask you if you showered this morning, but
I used a hose in the backyard. Was that count?
it does, as long as you had a little soap and water with you.
Oh, you have to use soap?
You got to use soap. Yeah. Soap and water equates to a shower. There you go.
Yeah. Well, good. And you did actually pretty good, Glenn. You're actually a pretty fart smeller.
A fart smeller. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Folks, we thank you again for your time today, and we always have a great time here on the podcast. We try to keep things light, but the seriousness of some of these things of not getting them serviced and checked, always find a reputable service center that does digital inspections, because they'll show you pictures of when your belt is starting to wear out, or your tensioner that's not working right, or your brakes that are wearing out. These things can leave you in a bad place if they fail on you, and they can even be deadly if they're not fixed. So get those things. If you smell something, it doesn't smell right, you're smelling gasoline or that mapley smell or whatever it is, you need to get those things serviced. Go to a reputable place that's got a great warranty, and preferably the digital inspection is so important, because then you know that what they're telling you you need to have is actual and factual, and you're spending your money wisely.
Yeah, and really, you kind of nailed it, Glenn. Really, regular maintenance is going to hope it can save you from smelling those unwanted smells. We can prevent a lot of that stuff. We can check the cabin air filter. We can check all these things. Check the belt, like Glenn said, the brakes, and then you won't have hoses. You won't have those smells, because once you nobody wants to smell that.
Absolutely. So remember, soap and water if you have other odors that have nothing to do with your car. And
Take a shower.
if you if you have any comments or you have any questions, we'd love for you to reach out to us on podcastunderthehood.com. That's podcastunderthehood.com. We are on many different venues, so please feel free to give us your questions, comments, and like us, and please subscribe. We'd appreciate that very much. Until next episode,